Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the At the Water's Edge podcast, where we look for insights beyond the headlines to take a practitioner's view on national security and geopolitics. It's the 19th of November, 2025. Let's get started. So, right off the bat, have to share, it's been a wild week. I was actually supposed to publish this episode last week, but as most of you listening to this know, based off the stats I'm looking at, I got caught up in a bit of a viral moment. My resume got out there on TikTok. All my socials were blowing up, even though I didn't have much of it in the way of social media. I've got a lot more now, of course. And I ended up going from not having a TikTok account to having millions of views on TikTok and appearing on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon and the Jonas Brothers. Wild ride. It was great. And so happy that so many of you are joining the podcast as a result of that experience. Was incredibly grateful to get out there on a national stage and bring up a topic supporting veterans that's near and dear to my heart as someone who's also gone through the transition process from military to civilian life a few years ago. And, there were some rough patches. So grateful for the opportunity to get out there on a national stage and bring attention to that issue. And I'm happy to say, as a result of that, a lot of wonderful people and organizations have reached out. I thought Brandon and I were going to come on the podcast and talk about it, and that was going to be our contribution to the effort. Looks like there's a lot more opportunities out there to get involved, and I'm excited to engage with those over the next almost year. It's actually looking like it's going to be fun. It's going to be good. So with that, back to our regularly scheduled programming. I am going to put out a podcast episode, hopefully by the end of the week. It'll be off-brand for the podcast, but it's just going to be talking about what's it like to go viral on TikTok and viral on the internet and be found out and end up on national media and the whole ride. So people can know what it was like behind the scenes from my perspective, at least. With that, yes, Brandon is still coming on the podcast. We got to schedule it, but we're going to make that happen before the end of the year. I have another wonderful expert lined up to come on to talk about China. She's fantastic. She's agreed to come on. We got to figure out the scheduling. And we do have another wonderful guest coming on, a former U.S. trade representative, to talk about trade. Because it's all about the Benjamins, baby. That's what the kids say, right? I don't know. I don't know what the kids say. I know what my kids say. They're 4 and 2. They don't say much in the way of money stuff. Anyway, back to the podcast. So today's guest, a gentleman named Logan Harris. He's the CEO of a company called Spotter Global. And they do a really cool thing. They design swap optimize, so, optimized for size, weight, and power, land radar detection systems that you can deploy either on drones or to protect critical infrastructure. Think the type of detection system you'd want around airports to prevent something like, I don't know, a bunch of kamikaze drones with explosives popping up out of semi-trailers and flying onto your runway and blowing up all your expensive planes. Not that that's happened in recent history. Anyway, his company makes a awesome piece of tech that helps mitigate that. They're deployed protecting installations and key infrastructure around the country. And excited to have this chance to talk to Logan about his thoughts on the future of the drone threat and the future of AI and what steps we need to be taking to protect our critical infrastructure here at home and also protect force abroad. So with that, we're going to go to a quick clip from another podcast on the Work to Find Network and then get to our conversation with Logan. And because everything's gone viral and I'm now officially out there on YouTube and everywhere else, and Logan on this podcast episode actually wanted to show some visual aids, first ones we had in the podcast, we're going to start putting out the podcast in video format. I just got to figure out how to make all that stuff work, but luckily I got some great people helping me. Anyway, with that, we'll get to the Work to Find Network clip and then off to Logan. Thanks.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your Hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, "Can we see more candidates?" Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
All right, Logan, good morning and welcome to the podcast. How are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great to have you on. So you run a company called Spotter Global. Can you tell us a bit who you are and what your company does?
Yeah, so my name is Logan Harris, and I am the CEO, president, and founder of Spotter. And what we do is we provide wide area surveillance for protection of critical infrastructure and warfighters. That's primarily through using a combination of compact surveillance radar that we invented back in 2008. And these small, radar devices, they weigh anywhere from 1.5 pounds to like 5 pounds. And they cover areas of ranges from 100 meters out to 2.5 kilometers. And they're very small, lightweight, and you can put them anywhere. And they're out there watching for movement, for people, for vehicles, for other types of threats. It gives you a precise GPS coordinate of where that threat is. We cue cameras on target. We evaluate, classify, and then we automate the response. So that's really what it's about. It's about looking for threats and automating the detection and response mechanism to reduce the workload on the operators.
Okay, and how long have you guys been doing this for?
The first radar was invented. Our first compact surveillance radar was invented back in 2008. So now that's been 17 years. As a separate company, that was 2009 when we split out from the other company I was doing that was doing airborne radar, and then decided to split and focus on ground-based radar, and was formed in 2009. 16 years.
Oh, wow. And back in 2009, what sort of threats are these radar systems primarily geared towards?
And that's interesting because our initial pull, and it wasn't like I saw this as a great market to go into all on my own. This was not, that's not the way it happened. It happened because people saw that we were doing this small 2-pound synthetic aperture radar that flew on the Boeing Scan Eagle. These, it's about 10-foot wingspan drone that this company in situ had developed, and they were using it in Iraq and Afghanistan for surveillance. And so they wanted something that could also see through the dust and the clouds and things like that. And that's what the SAR, the synthetic aperture radar, is. Radar can see through that stuff. So we developed this really small SAR, and then this guy from DARPA saw us, and he was aware of this program with the military, where special forces were going out on what was called these village stability operations, VSOs, and they needed some way to protect themselves. And these are small groups, just going in with a small number of people. They got to carry everything that they're going to use with them. So they couldn't use these large ground surveillance radars that were available at the time. And so they're saying, well, if you can do a 2-pound SAR, why can't you do, a 1.5, 2-pound ground surveillance radar? And at the time, those were like 100 pounds. So, that's a 50-time reduction in size. And so that's what we did. They saw what we were doing, modified our radar hardware and also our algorithms to kind of change what it was supposed to do to be tracking, people and vehicles in real time and they gave us a little bit of money. DARPA did, and then that spun us up. We got an investment from Incutel, and we were up and going. Delivered our first units, our first radars in the beginning of 2011 to SOCOM, and they're still using them.
Okay, so that's 2 years from starting the company to delivering product to the DoD. That's an incredibly fast turnaround.
Yeah, well, it was nice that we already had quite a bit to start from.
That's
we
true.
Developed a lot of the kind of the key intellectual property and techniques and processes beforehand, and so we just kind of tweaked it, turned it, but it was all driven by market demand. So that's kind of the interesting part there, is that it was the market saying, we want this, we need this, and us responding to that.
So how have you seen the market for ground-based radar shift since 2011? Obviously, we've come out of the global war on terror. We're in this era of great power competition. The needs of the military have changed, but there's also this huge emerging market out there for protecting civil infrastructure outside of the Department of Defense, outside of immediate security applications. So what does this market look like now?
It's broadened. I mean, when we first were starting this, nobody even, compact surveillance radar was brand new, and nobody was like, it's kind of like saying, well, what do you need that for? Where would you use that? Now it's become, in the security industry, it's become kind of more of an accepted part, a tool in their toolkit. To kind of case in point, in 2013, prior to 2013, there really wasn't much demand in the security market, like the critical infrastructure. You're talking power plants and substations and dams and things like that. They weren't really there wasn't much demand for it. Then we were primarily military, but then in 2013, there was an attack against this substation in California called Metcalf, and a couple of people with AK-47s shot up the substation, and within a few minutes, and they were several hundred meters away from the fence line, so they didn't get any video of them or anything like that. They just stood hundreds of meters away, shot up the transformers, blew them up, caused tens of millions of dollars of damage within that short period of time, got away easily. And that critical substation went offline. They were able to reroute, and so they were able to continue to supply power. So there wasn't a power outage caused by it at that time. But that started to get the industry really concerned. And then again, so the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, the FERC, did a study and a simulation that said that. And then they leaked this out to the press. The New York Times ran this, huge article about it that said, if you take down 9 critical substations, and there's about 400 of these critical substations across the United States, and if you take down 9, kind of spread out over the United States, if you take down 9 of them, you take the whole grid of the United States offline, and it will take weeks, if not more, for it to come back online. And you think about it, well, okay, that's 9 people with a rifle, and all of a sudden the entire grid goes offline. It's a really, scary prospect to think about, and that drove our adoption into these critical substations. So that we came out with our first, and you can see it right over there. Not for all your listeners, but for Scott here, he can see it. That little white box right there, that was our first commercial unit, the C40, that we released in 2012. That got adopted in 2013 as it started, going out to these substations where we could see where the threat is, prior to shots being fired. And so now we're in the majority of these substations, protecting these substations. In conjunction, of course, they put in additional cameras and walls and other barriers, but that's still, of prime concern. And now it's not just, what's on the ground, but also now it's in the air. And that's the next major kind of like development in the market, is, now they've, in most places that are, critical, type security, they've got ground, they've got fences, and they got cameras, and they've got some fence line sensors, and they've got radar. But now the next thing is, in the air, you've got this, now this large space that anybody with a little bit of money doesn't, $500-$600 can buy you a pretty good drone. And with a few $1,000s, now you got a serious weapon that can cause all kinds of havoc. And we can see that on a daily basis coming out of Ukraine.
Yeah, there was that crazy story where they've had a ton of drones hidden in the top of delivery trucks that popped out and, wiped out a whole flight line of Russian bombers. Wild to watch.
Yeah. I mean, you think about that and you say, okay, well, someone with some, intuitive and inventive type, thinking could say, smuggle these and launch them from anywhere. And now they're flying control off of the cell network. That's so you could have these driven into anywhere and then just pop it up and fly it where your operator is on the other side of the world. It's a kind of a scary prospect, but this is the reality that we're in nowadays. That's what we deal with.
So do you currently have a suite of radars that can detect drones?
Yes. So we use a combination of both our ground radars as well. We have our air radar. We call the AX250 for 250 meters. AX stands for air, X band, 250 meter range on a small drone like a 1.5 kilogram drone. And this one's a rotator. So it scans electronically vertically and then rotates horizontally. So it has a full dome hemispherical coverage. So there's no gaps over top or on the side. Now, usually it's put on a building, so lower down. So if they're flying really low, that's where we use our ground radars to pick up, drones, people, and vehicles that are flying. Not the people are flying, but the drones that are flying at very low altitudes. So we'll also track these drones that are flying low with our ground radars as well as our kind of over-the-top radar.
Okay. And how do you actually go out and deploy these things? Like, what equipment do you need on site to run a radar system like this?
So it's really some power and communications. Of course, if it's a fixed installation, you need a pole to put it on. But we also have what we call, for the military, they're called tactical radar kits. These are ones that can fit in a backpack or in a small Pelican case, tripod-based. You can use batteries to power this because they're not really, they don't take a lot of power. If you kind of put it in perspective, the AX250, that's our, over-the-top, hemispherical one, that takes 22 watts of power. You think about it, even now with your cell phones, you got a 20-watt power supply that comes with your cell phone. So with the power much less than what's consumed by your laptop or your tablet, powers up one of these radar systems. So it is quite small, lightweight, and low power.
Gotcha. And as far as what frequencies are you radiating on for these radar systems? Because I know those are very tightly regulated in the United States and most other places in the world. So, like, how do you actually get authority to transmit on a frequency and radiate a signal next to these critical pieces of infrastructure? That's got to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's actually not that bad as long as the government is open. Right now, we can't get a license if you're, right now, if you're kind of out of luck, if you don't already have one, until the government opens, because we do have to apply to the FCC. So we have experimental licenses for our new development stuff that we use. And then for our customers who are doing installations, we have two different kind of family of radars and different radar bands. One is the X band, and for us, that's in the 10 to 10.5 gigahertz range. Those are licensed radars, so you do have to go and you apply, you put in a form with the FCC, or you go through a third party that will do it for you. It's pretty straightforward. You have to put your location and what type of radar it is. And we've already certified all of our radars, and we've had to get licenses. certifications from the FCC. So we've already done that. So they just say, okay, it's this device, and we're putting it here at this many locations, and they put it in. And a couple of months later, the FCC says, okay, here you go. Here's a license to transmit. That's for the 10 to 10.5. And those are mostly our military grade radars, including the X250. So that needs a license. Then we have our unlicensed ones. And now these are ones that are certified, but are operating in an unlicensed band at 24 gigahertz. So at 24 gigahertz, there's a few hundred megahertz of unlicensed bandwidth that we can operate in. And in that case, so this is really popular for a lot of our industrial clients who don't necessarily want to wait a couple months to get a license. And they're shorter range. Our longest range, 24 gigahertz radar is about 350, 400 meters distance on a person and 800 meters on a vehicle. So still, quite long range, but not quite the same. So that's our kind of like our two frequency bands. We do also offer an unlicensed X-band one at 10.525 gigahertz, where there's another small unlicensed, what they call it, ISM band, instrumental scientific band, that we can operate at 10.525. So it's just one RF channel that we can use. But for those who need the X band but don't want to do the license, there is an option.
Okay. Now, it sounds like for this 10 gig band for military applications, some of the stuff is being used to protect critical infrastructure. With the government shut down right now, are there any deployments of your technology that are being held up because of the government shutdown currently?
It is I'm starting to see an impact. Yeah, things are starting to slow down. Mostly, of course, on the federal side or the military side. Yeah, we're starting to see things delay. Yep, it's delaying.
Okay. And you guys ever run into regulatory problems with keeping those bands of RF frequency open for use? I know in the telecommunications industry, T-Mobile, Verizon, all those guys are constantly fighting over spectrum. They're actually trying to pull spectrum away from the DoD. I think it's like the 3.1 megahertz band, which has like $1 billion worth of equipment on it that they're trying to pull away and use for commercial use. Do you see that sort of risk in this market when you're relying on government licensed bands?
We haven't really been impacted by that, just because in that band, that 10 to 10.5, they have some pretty well established usage for it, for geolocation. So that's been there for a long time, and nobody's been making a big push to try to carve out more frequency out of that band. So as of yet, in the last 20 years that I've been working in that band, we haven't seen any issues of that being restricted or having some other big player trying to come in and take spectrum. So no, we haven't really been impacted by that.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, when you deploy these systems, how can they tell what they're looking at? How do they know if they're looking at a drone, a flock of birds, somebody's stray dog that got away from the house? How does it differentiate what it's looking at?
Yeah, so we typically are deployed, and we work very much with camera systems. So yes, the radar can analyze and see some, like we call microdoppler effects. They can see, some variation in the signal that we can help do classification. In fact, we were one of the first, I think maybe we were the first to develop a radar AI, basically a neural net that analyzed the metadata coming off of the radar to classify what it is, whether it's a person, an animal, a vehicle, or a bird, that type of thing. And that will work to a certain point. 99% of the time, it's able to correctly identify what it is, but you still have the other 1 or 2% that where it doesn't properly classify what it is, turns into nuisance alarms. So recently, and so we've been queuing cameras onto these targets almost from the beginning. So the optical and thermal, cameras, they're good for identifying and helping to classify what it is that you're actually tracking. So the radar's out there scanning the wide area, finding the targets, finding the relevant targets. Then we automate the queuing of the cameras onto the targets. And then from that, we say, okay, now we have just introduced video AI. So our own video AI engine is looking at that video feed and then analyzing it to say, okay, well, this is an animal, this is a person, this is a vehicle. So we have dual confirmation from the radar AI and the video AI to say, okay, yeah, this is something of interest.
How has the growth of AI impacted how these radars are employed, and what level of fidelity with the information they gather they can provide to a decision maker?
Well, it is enhanced our capabilities considerably. What was available just a few years ago has changed. I mean, everyone has seen kind of the enhancements, even from your Google Photos doing facial recognition. I mean, it's over the last few years, it's just improved and improved. And now it's becoming, widely accessible. And I can show you, should I share you a screen share? I mean, it won't make any difference to the viewers, but
publishing audio only right now, but we can describe what we're looking at.
But, I guess let me do this and help. It'll help for you and I to kind of discuss it if we can see it here. So this is our networked I/O command and control software, and it combines video as well as the radar today. So you've got the GPS coordinates and the tracks, so you can see right here. This is where the target went. We got it classified as an animal, and if we can see right here, so there's the animal, and while this is going, the video AI is analyzing the video stream to classify what it is, as well as the radar AI. So the radar AI, which we're calling a sensor class, like it said, oh, well, it thought it was a person, but the video AI said, oh yeah, I got an average of 43% confidence that it's a vehicle or an animal, and 70% for the max class. So I can use that data to properly classify. Having the two work together definitely benefits the operators and reduces false alarms.
Yeah, so for people just listening, what we got up on the screen right now is two images. One's a still from a video camera. The other one is an overlay like you'd see in Google Maps with color-coded sections for where the radar is scanning. And it can show you where it picks up an object and then the route that object's taking. And I'm guessing the AI automatically takes that information, knows which camera to jump to pull the visual image from, and correlate the visual image to what the radar is detecting. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's an excellent description.
Okay. So this would have been super useful. I'm kind of curious why this isn't more widely adopted, because I remember it was 2021 and I'm sitting in an operations center in Afghanistan, and the NCO from the BDOC runs into the ops center. He's like, "Hey, we're getting shot at." I'm like, "What do you mean we're getting shot at?" He's like, "Well, this boomerang just went off, and this boomerang's like an audio device that detects gunshots." I'm like, "Okay, where's the boomerang? Did anyone hear a gunshot? Like, what's going on?" It was a false positive. But I was like, "Man, why can't I just like pull the camera right here and go look at where this thing's sitting? Or why can I not just scan the area to see what's moving around me?" We actually flat open terrain where we were at. Would have been pretty easy to scan it with radar, ground sensors, all that stuff. And it was 2021, and we just didn't have it set up. So, I mean, costing is always important with all this. You can have the world write a big enough check. Roughly how much does it cost to hook up a camera system and a radar system like this for, we were talking about, a power transit station?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not cheap in the sense of kind of like from a perspective of home security system, where you get you got like doorbell camera, and a little system like that for a couple $100. You're looking for like a substation. Is more like, for a smaller substation, it's 40 or 50,000, or for a large one, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars to.
That's
protect
still
the whole
surprisingly
system.
cheap for infrastructure.
Yes, I mean it is cost effective compared to putting in poles in the ground every 30 or 50 meters in a thermal camera.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, and what you explained there is, I'm glad you've been able to see that for yourself, and the context of where the threat is and how best to respond to it is a problem when you're just dealing with 1,000 cameras. And even if you've got video AI analyzing all that cameras, so you say, pull up an alarm and say, okay, there's a person. Well, where is that person? And that's where and this right here, you can see, this is where it gives you the context. And in real time, you can see exactly, okay, well, it's coming over here on this edge. It automatically is cueing the proper camera. You can see the field of view of the camera of where it's pointing, so you'll know which camera is being cued. It'll automatically bring that camera up in this other window inside of the main window. So you have this contextual type information that allows you to very quickly understand what the situation is, and then deploy resources as needed to deal with that. And you can do other things like cue a spotlight, put a siren, or have like a loudspeaker turn on, put a strobe light. I mean, we've even done systems, for like dams that use these long range acoustic devices, LRADs, where they can put like 80 decibels on a person at 500 meters. And, it's kind of like the sound of, it's the voice of God in your head from these things. It's really incredible. And that's the type of things we do.
Cool. Are there any recent examples of how these systems have actually been employed to protect infrastructure working with law enforcement? Like, how often do these things actually go from insurance policy to actively used?
Well, they're being actively used all around the world. Our hardest problem there is a lot of our clients are very, very secretive, as I should say. Even the ones that very well, they don't like any publicity, and so we've got all these NDAs that we can't talk about. That being said, you can see there's instances that are public, and all the way from things like Polar Bears International. There was just a video article that was posted by weather.com as part of Polar Bear Week of how they're using our radars for tracking polar bears and alerting the villagers at Churchill, Canada, about polar bears coming, because they got a lot of polar bears and they're hungry. So that's a danger both to the polar bear and to the people. And so they're using our radars for tracking polar bears. So that's just one application. That's another public application is we're working with this other company called GeoProvant, which is a company out of Switzerland that tracks avalanches and rock falls. And so they use our radars for that type of thing as well. It's a safety issue. We recently did an event as part of a football game on October 18th, where we provided kind of like Overwatch, where we were tracking drones with our remote drone ID sensor and showing the drone traffic around the stadium during the game. So those are all types of things that we do. Of course, we do a lot of these, a lot of these substations, and if you start knowing what to look for, you can start seeing them, around and about.
Cool. So when you're looking at something like drones around a football game, so your radar can pick up the drone. Can it also detect where the person flying the drone is?
Yes, the radar doesn't. The radar picks up the motion. So and that's where you can use different technologies for different purposes. The remote drone ID sensor picks up the broadcast signal. It's a FAA mandated signal that they need to broadcast to be legal in the United States. Any drone above 250 grams has to transmit the signal that says where they're located in real time, so their GPS coordinates, as well as their altitude, their serial number, and their operator's GPS coordinates. So we can pull that up as well, and that allows them, so if I go to that, I'll show you this one. So that allows us to see, we've got, looks like that was just internal here. So if we pull here, and I can show you this from the last few days here, looks like they're doing an upgrade on it. Let me pull up a different one. Here we go. So this, you can see this right here. Same type of things. We can see the tracks of where the drones are, but then we also pull the operator. So again, for those who are listening, I'm showing a map, and then on the map is an icon of where the operator is located, along with the tracks of where the drones passed over. So yes, we can now send out security or the police to intercept that. And we did an event during the 4th of July where we did just that, where we tracked 4 different drones that flew over a crowded stadium with like 50,000 people in it during a fireworks show, and they were able to intercept 2 of the operators by having this type of information.
Nice. So it's automatically pulling the registered information for the drone, but also based on the flight path, you can make an inference of, where the operator is likely located.
But no, it's not an inference. It's actually the GPS location pulled off, because their tablets or your phone, when you're using the controller, it's pulling the GPS coordinates so that, how the drone knows where to go home.
Gotcha. So you can pull that off the radar.
It's from this broadcast signal, we can pull that information off and then plot it in our C2, our command and control software. And now we can say, with a high level of confidence, it's right in this area. And so, we've done that a lot of times where, for these types of events, we say, okay, here's the information, and the police or the security people can go over and go talk to that individual to have them, bring down the drone and move it away from where they shouldn't be.
Gotcha. This seems like something like this would be very important around airports. I'm specifically thinking of Ronald Reagan in D.C., where they recently had that helicopter collision with the passenger airliner based off difficult flight paths. About 20 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, there's actually a conglomerate that does a lot of drone testing and drone regulatory compliance issues, and they deep dive all that stuff. And I was talking to somebody over there, and they're talking about how we have so little monitored airspace in America. We actually have no idea what's flying near most of our major airports, because all those radars essentially go straight up. They don't scan the local area at all. And I'm just wondering, has a system like this started to get deployed around commercial airports so they actually see what's flying around them, below 400 feet and not just up in the sky at 10,000? Because I was surprised to find out just how blind airports are to what's actually flying in the immediate area. It was shocking.
Yeah, we're still in very early days. We released this and went into production in May of this year. So we're still very much in the early days where this is being, it's being looked at. Of course, airports and such, they take a little bit of time to make decisions. We'll be announcing some strategic partnerships in the next 2 weeks towards helping deliver this type of capabilities to regional airports, as well as private airports and helipads, heliports. You think any place where you've got air traffic, low altitude air traffic, they're at risk. And this is just around our building. I went back over the history over the last 2 days. So over the last 2 days, we have 155 tracks of drones. And you can see Some of this is our own drone, flying over a park where we're doing, flight testing here. That's so you can see this path. But outside of that little bunch right there, you can see we've got drones flying over the neighborhoods. Got tracks over there, up on the mountains over by the roadway. We're picking stuff up on the top of the mountains here, down over by, these commercial buildings. Like, okay, well, why is someone flying a drone over the commercial building? I don't know. It could be real estate agents. It could be doing surveys. But there's a lot of traffic. And if you look over, say, let's look back a couple of weeks so that we're on the 7th. So if we go back to, say, like the 24th of October, and it's going back through the history now. So I'm searching back through the history to see how many drone flights. We got 559 drone flights. If you see someone doing a survey, going lawnmower pattern back and forth, it happens on a fairly regular basis. And this is just a little suburban neighborhood in Orem, Utah. You look at that and you say, okay, now if you're flying a helicopter, or if you're trying to come into land and say this is by a small airport, you'd like to know if there's a drone up and flying.
Well, I'm thinking too, like life flight for a hospital. I mean, those things happen real quick. It's not like they've got a lot of time to clear airspace and book a route and file flight plan. Like they get a call and they got to go.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're starting to hear during the Texas floods about a month ago, one search and rescue helicopters did run into a drone. Actually, there was a collision. Luckily, it didn't hit any of the critical, parts of the helicopter, so they were able to land safely. And then they had to get it repaired. But that type of occurrence, I think, is just going to be more and more frequent as time goes by. As now there's an estimated nearly 26 million drones. About 1 million of them are registered. So there's another 25 million unregistered drones out there. The good news is most of these are fairly new because drones don't last very long. They crash and they break. So the vast majority of them are the type where we can get this information off them readily. So that's what you're seeing here. What I'm showing is just how widespread drone use is, and yes, that for helicopters or low flying aircraft, it's a danger, and it's just going to be worse.
So when it comes to selling and deploying your products, this technology, what are the biggest obstacles that you run into? Is it just convincing people or informing people that this technology exists and that there's a use case for it? Is it finding customers with, money, convincing the airport they need it, but now they have to go get the budget for it? Or are there regulatory issues with actually rolling this out and turning on radar systems? Because anytime you're propagating an RF signal any distance, you're bound to trigger a regulatory tripwire somewhere. State, local, federal.
For the radars, yes. For the RDID, the remote drone ID, the sensor I'm showing right at the moment, it's a passive radio, so it doesn't require a license. So we're just listening. So it's not emitting. It's just a radio that's listening. So that case, that there isn't any regulatory hang-ups. It's just looking in the different Wi-Fi bands for that signal that they have to broadcast. So that's not a problem. But for the radars, yes, like we talked earlier, if they're operating in the X-band, they need to get licenses. So there's a couple months there to get through those regulatory hoops. License, those can go out immediately. But I would say in the beginning, there's more of kind of an educational type thing. People need to know that it exists. Which is why I'm here talking with you today, is to help let people know there is this type of capability out there, because that's the first problem, awareness. it's not like this has been around for the very long. I mean, even though I've been doing this for coming up on 20 years, it's still perceived as a very new technology. It's not something that everybody's aware of. Like now, pretty much everybody's aware of IP-based camera systems, networked, cameras. But they took a number of years before they became, before people in the industry became aware that these were, something that was worthwhile, something good to use. So yes, so first awareness, second education. How does it work in my location? What does it do? How can it help solve my security problems? Where do I use it? How much does it cost? Does it interface with my systems? So you got that educational process you got to go through. And then there's the deployment. If we're doing these fixed sites, then it's part of a construction project. So, of course, you got construction timelines. And that's why we are also doing these portable systems, what we call the tactical radar kits, the TRKs, or if it's on the commercial side, mobile surveillance kits, MSKs. And these are kind of like all prepackaged. And there was an article that was just done by Security Magazine talking about our new MSK that has Starlink coupled to it all together into a single package where you just apply power. And now you've got comms anywhere in the world. You have a camera like we have, shown with the Pelco camera in combination with an RDID or radar and communications. And you just have to apply power. So that's, can be battery operated, run off a solar trailer, or plugged into the wall.
Nice. Have you guys ever come across any concerns with, privacy for the public when you're deploying not just the radar, but integrating it into different camera systems? Because it seems like there's a lot of public spaces out there that are just constantly being monitored more and more.
Yeah, and most of the places where we're deployed is either private or governmental locations, so they have the right to monitor their areas and their facilities. Of course, in a more urban environment, the neighbors don't want to be monitored, which is a valid concern. But it's also very nice because with our systems, you can go in and you can define zones, geographical zones, like what I'm showing here, where you can go in and actually modify those zones so that you only look in the areas where you're allowed to look. So that way, outside of this, area, I can set it up so my camera just cues within a particular geographical zone and not outside of it. So that way we can resolve any of the concerns that private citizens might have that, they're being monitored. And so and of course that's with the camera systems. And with the radar, it doesn't provide identifiable, it's not like you're going to know who it is with a radar system. It does with the remote drone ID. That's a different thing. With remote drone ID, you actually get a serial number, and you can use that serial number to look up who it's registered, if it is registered, or the police can use it for forensics to go, track down the individual. But that's part of what flying a drone you have to be cognizant about, is that when you fly a drone, that's part of what goes along with flying a drone, is that it's like it's the same thing that we had to do with vehicles, where you have a license plate, and that's in essence the drone equivalent of a license plate is that remote ID.
Gotcha. Now, when you're talking to different communities of users, one might be law enforcement, another one might be DoD, another one might be commercial client. What are their biggest fears about drone technology and where it's going next? What drives them to want to have these radar systems in place, do this detection, this deterrence? How's that difference between, commercial, law enforcement, defense?
And it's kind of I'd call it kind of a tiered level of risk. you start with kind of like the careless, the clueless, and then the low-end criminal, and then you get the terrorist and the state actors. So it's kind of like a 5-tiered list of risk. And so depending on what the site is and what you're trying to protect, if it's more kind of industrial, commercial, or even high-end residential, it's the careless and the clueless and kind of the low-end criminals. So you're talking about people who are just, flying the drones around, not really paying attention to where they're going or what they're doing or what they should be doing. And then you have the paparazzi and other, individuals like that. And then the next tier from that is kind of like the mid to high end criminal. And those criminals are trying to do things like espionage, or maybe they're dropping drugs into a prison, or maybe they're smuggling drugs across the border. They're going to be more sophisticated. They're not necessarily going to use drones that are broadcasting their location. They're going to be flying, dark drones, as we call it, that aren't necessarily emitting anything at all. And that's where you need radar, because radar just tracks the motion of moving objects. And so that's where you go into, say, okay, this is maybe you're in a prison facility, you're looking for drugs being dropped in. Now, critical infrastructure, now they're concerned with kind of a combination of terrorist type actors or even state actors that might be trying to, weaponize a drone to cause, a real severe event. So it kind of depends on the facility and the location and what type of risk they're concerned about.
Gotcha. What innovation in drones do you think is going to come up next that further confounds this effort to try to detect what's out there and mitigate the damage that they can cause? What's on the next horizon for drone technology that we're not quite anticipating yet? Because it seems like we're still trying to roll out the infrastructure we would need to protect ourselves from threats that existed 10 years ago.
Well, and that's the thing. It's already happened. Fiber optically guided drones, I call them fog drones. It's for fiber optically guided drones, fly-by-wire drones. So they're not emitting anything. They're not broadcasting anything. And they're being flown first person, navigated, so that you can't jam them. They're not using GPS. And these are coming out of, the Ukraine-Russia, war. But now you can start buying these. I was just looking that you could go buy from Alibaba, you can buy a fiber optically guided drone for $1,500, and you have a 10-kilometer, range for $1,500, and you can just buy it. I mean, this is it's not just. I mean, this is the next generation of threat, but it's not like, oh, it's 5 years from now. It's today, and that's what this is what's happened. The first fiber optically guided drone that I saw anything of, was from Russia back in winter, in the kind of the fall of 2024, and here we are a year later, and now you can buy it, basically off the shelf in 1 year. That's the pace of the technology. So there's that. There's the fiber optically guided drones, and now there are the video AI guided drones. So these video AI guided drones, they're also can't be jammed because they're also not using GPS. They're also not flying on a command and control system. They're not being guided in that sense. They're being programmed ahead of time to fly to a particular location, and they're doing it autonomously. So again, you can't jam these, and jamming was kind of like the main tool, a weapon against the previous generation of drones, and it's completely ineffective now. It's completely ineffective, and so now we have to have some sort of other response, and so they're trying to do lasers, but those are really big and expensive, hard to do. And now we've got drone on drone. There's now developing small scale weapon systems so you have to apply kinetics in order to take these down. And then as you're talking about critical infrastructure, now you're worrying about the fallout is, okay, well, if I take out a drone, where is it going to fall? What is it going to do? And so, yeah, you're seeing a lot of now drone on drone type of actions are taking place. And it's hard. Yeah, it is hard for the countermeasure to keep up with the offensive measures. So it's a continuous cycle, but it's moving a whole lot faster than it was in the past. The speed of innovation is increasing exponentially.
Yeah, I think I was reading somewhere where out in Ukraine, I think it's a 45-day turnaround from, a new technology being implemented on the battlefield, the other side adapting to it, coming up to a counter, and they're running through that cycle in 30 to 45-day increments. Whereas, a typical DoD contracting cycle is 2 to 5 years.
Yeah. And I think they understand. I think they're understanding it, and they're trying to make some changes to adapt to that. But it's there's a lot of inertia in our military industrial complex that is not built to deal with that. And that is our challenge of companies like ourselves, is to rapidly be able to adapt. And that's, it is a challenge, especially as we're trying to get funding and, investment dollars to build the next thing, to counter these threats. That is a challenge, but it is the speed of that cycle that you're referring to is just incredible.
Yeah. We're coming up on our time, but what advice would you give policymakers who are trying to look at how to harden America's infrastructure and protect the public from this emerging technology that we're seeing evolve and take off in all sorts of weird and unanticipated ways? What would you tell policymakers?
I've been saying this for a long time, but it's really is that the critical infrastructure operators need to have the authority to mitigate drones. We need to do more than just being able to know that they're there. We need to be able to do more than just detect. We need to be able to respond to those threats, because by the time, we go find the operator, it may be too late. Even though it's helpful, but someone with real intent to destroy and damage, we need to be able to stop it. And we do have those technologies available, but we need the authority to use them. That's the main point. I say we need, and it's starting to. Louisiana just passed their own state law to say that law enforcement can use reasonable force in Louisiana to mitigate drones that are causing a danger. They're the first state to do so. And they did it at the state level. So there's going to be I'm sure there's going to be a lawsuit, between the FAA and Louisiana about this. But that's what's happening, because at the federal level, there hasn't been, a consensus reached of how or what to do about this. But that it's unfortunate to say, but it's probably going to take a major security event before things change.
That is sad but true. Well, I'm sure that as soon as the government reopens, Congress will get right on it and take on this issue in good faith and come up with a solution and pass legislation by Christmas. And we'll get right on it Q1 next year, deploying the right technologies and systems to stop it. I'm sure that's what's going to happen. What is it, Friday? I'm sure Monday it's going to reopen, and by Tuesday they'll be talking about it.
Well, if something really major happens, actually they will.
Yeah.
But until that does, unfortunately, it's going to take. I've been saying this for the last 10 years, and I'm going to keep on saying it. Is that it's going to take a major security event on our soil before the laws really change in a broad way. Unfortunately,
I think you're probably right. Well, Logan, thank you so much for hopping on with us this morning. It's been awesome talking with you and hear about your company. Wish you all nothing but the best, and good luck out there.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Have a great day.
Two.